Hi, welcome to Ultradent's Facebook Live page. I'm Dr. John Flucke. I'm technology editor for Dental Products Report magazine. And for those of you that might think you know a lot about curing, you're in for a little bit of a surprise today because the gentleman that I'm with today is Dr. Richard Price, and he knows a lot about curing lights. He's also an instructor, teaches at dental school in Canada. He's very well published in all aspects of dentistry. But his real passion the last few years has been curing lights and how curing lights work and what they do for us. So thank you very much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me here.
Thank you. What got you interested in this whole thing, or how long have you been at this with curing lights, Richard?
Well, it all kind of started off when I did my PhD on bonding of resins to dentin.
I told you guys he was smart.
I had a great time doing that stuff, and I realized at that time that maybe the curing light was kind of important when it came to achieving a good bond. And that was around about the year 2000 that I got really interested in it, and my passion has carried on these last 17 years on dental curing lights.
So for those of you out there that are wondering why we have the cadaver head, this isn't really actually a cadaver head. This is a device that he invented called Mark, and it helps us understand the process of curing. So if you could kind of tell us a little bit about Mark and what Mark does and what the thought process was behind his creation.
Sure. This device here, Mark, is basically it's a patient simulator that we use for teaching doctors, dentists, and students and dental assistants how to do light curing. And what it has, it's got a sensor in the front and a sensor in the back to detect how much light is being delivered to fake cavities inside a mouth. So we've got the one in the front for a kind of easy curing and the one in the back for kind of more difficult curing.
And I want to just interrupt for a second. So the one in the back is, I know you can't see it on the feed, but it is actually built into the occlusal surface of the first molar. So it's not just on the roof of the mouth, it's actually in there like you would have with a restoration.
Yeah, it's on the second molar there. So we use this to show students how to do proper light curing. And just maybe a quick practical demonstration is the best way to show that. So we go and pick up the Velo Grand curing light here. And yes, I'm pleased to see that you're getting your glasses on, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and cure this fake restoration that's on the facial between the two central incisors. Putting on my glasses, and we're all ready to go here. And I'm now starting to cure this restoration. And as I'm curing it, I can see on the screen here that the light output's very steady, and I'm doing a pretty good job of doing the light curing in that particular case. I can go and look at the light output in terms of the spectrum, and we can see here very clearly that this is what we call a broad spectrum LED curing light. It's got several emission peaks here, covering a broad range from below 400 up to 500. If I just switch now and just pick up a different curing light and do it in the same position. Now I'm going to do a curing again. And first thing you can see, it kind of went up and down a bit there as I was trying to get the light to work. But now it's pretty steady. And I'm going to stop it now.
Okay.
I was doing a reasonable job there, light curing, other than the spot where I missed. But what I really want to show you here, John, is look at the difference in the spectrum. So we can see here that these two lights, although when I shine them, and when the dentists were to use them, they would kind of both look blue. They actually have very different spectral emissions. And because of that, they may not cure the composites as well as you might like.
So, and that's because the Velo has 4 LEDs. 2 of them are set up to cure camphorquinone, which is what normally we cure. And then there's the 2 that are of a lower wavelength, and those are the ones for the proprietary photo initiators, correct?
That is correct, yes. It contains additional LED chips in there, so it's going to cover a broad spectrum. This particular light that we looked at only contains LEDs that are going to cover a narrow spectrum.
Okay. And so that's important because, like you said, even though they're both blue, they're not always doing the same things. Obviously, this one's covering a much wider wavelength and able to set more than the one that's covering the more narrow wavelength, even though the intensity could be the same of those lights.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the intensity could be the same if you go and measure it on a meter. It could be just the same. Now, Ultradent actually has got some very neat little sensors that we can use. And because the lights are going to be directly on these, we don't actually have to put on the, on the glasses at this point. But when I use this on this disc here, we can see here on there, John.
Okay.
We can see the sensors change color. And when I use the Velo, we see the sensor has changed color again. But what you'll notice there is the difference in the tip size is really visible on the piece of plastic. You can see how it's a different diameter. So it's starting to fade with time. So John, if you just want to hold this again for me.
Sure.
Okay. So we can see this in front of the camera.
Sure. I'll do it like that.
So I'm just going to hold this in place. And then do it again with this one. And we can see the difference. Now, we'll go and change, and we'll use the different color. Now, this particular sensor is sensitive to the alternative lower wavelengths of light. So when I go and shine the Velo light on there.
So these are on this is more sensitive to the 400 range.
This is more the 400 range, and we can see here that the Velo is activating that. When I go and change it now to the other light, there's nothing there. It's not that the light isn't working. The light is working. It's producing blue light, but it's not activating those lower wavelength photoinitiators. And that is exactly what we saw in the Mark system. But the Mark system actually shows the reason why that's happening. It's not some trickery. It's a case of the fact that these two lights, although they seem to produce blue light to our eyes, when we look at them with some fancy equipment, we see that actually they're very different.
Well, now before, when we were talking about this, and you were telling me about walking through the clinic and watching the dental students cure, and that's kind of what gave you the initial idea for being able to measure the light directly on the tooth. Can you kind of tell our audience a little bit about that? Because I thought that was a great story.
Yeah, I think the best way is to really show you that as a practical demonstration. So when I would walk through the clinic, I'd see the students light curing restorations, and they might start out with the light over the tooth, and then they will be talking to their dental assistant, or they might be going around and picking up something, and they would find very quickly that the light output varied a little bit. Sorry. Now, that was done using the Velo light there. And I'm now going to switch, and I'm going to use a light that's got a smaller tip on it. And I'm going to do the same thing again. Put the light on here, and I'm going to start talking to you, and the light is actually on the tooth. Okay, it is there. I've got my finger there.
Yeah.
Okay. But because this particular curing light has got a very narrow tip on it, then small differences in the tip position have a much larger effect on the output from the light.
And so, I mean, I've been in a lot of offices and watched a lot of people work in my career, and I have noticed that where that, somebody puts a light, they pick it up and they put it in the general, vicinity of something, and then as they talk to you or they turn to look somewhere, and suddenly the light is 10, 12 millimeters away from where they thought it was, and they end up with something that possibly could be, looks set when they get done, but they haven't done nearly enough, time, and they haven't been nearly close enough to actually have set the composite properly.
Yeah, and that's the real problem that we have with dental composites, in that the top of these composites gets hard very quickly. So even after 1 or 2 seconds, it's hard to scrape. The dentist can never tell what's going on at the bottom of the composite because they can't feel that down there.
Right.
If you think about, I use the analogy of cooking. If you're baking a cake, then the top of the cake, you're wondering, well, is the bottom cooked? And so what you do is you get a wooden stick and you stick it in there, and it comes out all gooey, then it's kind of
Yeah,
undercooked, half-baked.
A lot like me.
But you can't do that with dental composites.
Sure.
You actually have to work on the recipe. So if the recipe says, cure it for 20 seconds, you need to cure it for 20 seconds.
And you need to be on it and not, 5 millimeters or 10 millimeters away as well.
Exactly. You need to be on it. We were doing the front restoration, which is an easy one for us to access. Let's now sort of pick the back one here. And this may show things a little bit more clearly. Mm-hmm. So although I'm using a really good light, I'm using the Velo Grand here, which is an excellent light with a big footprint, it's in the mouth, okay? But look at the output that we can see from the curing light. It went up and down, and the amount of energy that delivered in this particular case may not have been adequate.
And so when you factor in then things like patient head movement, maybe they have to move a little bit, or we're looking at things like the matrix and
Sure.
the sectional matrices we use now with the rings, and now
Yes.
suddenly you've got more hardware in the way. It's just harder to actually get into those areas, so the light intensity becomes important.
Yeah, patient positioning is important. You need to, I always recommend to the students and to practitioners that what they do is that they wear glasses and they actually watch what they're doing. It sounds like a simple thing to say, but most people don't want to watch what they're doing.
No.
Because they're afraid of damaging their eyes. So here I am now. I'm light curing. You saw me quickly look at the screen there, but I am watching exactly what I'm doing. That light is right over that tooth, and then when I do that, I get a nice steady output and deliver enough energy to the restoration.
Yeah, and the light has done its job because you haven't varied it at all, which is nice. Because so many people. That's what I love about Mark is the whole idea of a lot of people in dentistry. If you ask them, do you use an orange filter on your light, or do you wear glasses, or one of the paddles, or whatever? And normally, what I hear from people is they say, "Oh, I don't look at the light. I get the light, on the tooth, and then I turn my head away and I hit the button." Well.
Yep.
That saves your eyes, but it doesn't really do much for dentistry because you don't know where the light is.
That's right. So, I've done exactly what you said. I've turned and looked away. I'm not looking at what's going on. I have no idea what's happening at this stage. Okay? And that's the problem.
Yeah.
With no idea what's going on. And we can see the output declined as I was doing that.
And that's one of the other things I think that's important just from a form factor. I like glasses simply because, if you have a paddle, for instance, you've got to have, now you've got two hands that have to work, and it's harder to stabilize things.
Yes.
And if you have one of the small filters that just goes over the end of the light, and we'll kind of guard it that way, I think that sometimes makes it hard because it's either not in the right position or the patient moves or whatever. And so once again, I think people get a little gun shy and they just choose not to look at, where they're aiming.
Yep. And because the top is hard, they have no idea how good the bottom is.
Exactly.
Again, they've followed the recipe. They've cooked it for 10 seconds or 20 seconds, but unfortunately the oven was at the wrong temperature, and they didn't know that.
I had a good anecdote along those lines. I had a friend of mine that was having trouble with composites, and they called me and said, "Could you come over and kind of troubleshoot what's going on in my office?" So I went over, and one of the things I took was a radiometer. And we were just bench curing and doing some things like that, and it turned out that the curing light was putting out light at 400 milliwatts per square centimeter. So it was curing, like you said, the occlusal surface, and everything seemed really crunchy, but there wasn't nearly enough energy getting down into the composite to actually set, and hence your sensitivity, because you've got a half-baked cake.
You got a half-baked cake, that's right. Yeah. And you mentioned sensitivities, so yes, I mean, the bottom of the resin restoration isn't cured very well. And you may say, well, so what? But, I'm sure if I was to say to you, John, that would you like to buy a bonding system that would double your bond strength? Or maybe even triple it? You would say, yeah.
Oh, of course, yeah. Absolutely.
I'll buy that,
yeah.
Okay? I want that material. But, I can tell you that if you don't cure it properly and it's mush at the bottom, you've got zero bond strength.
Right.
So what's happening is that if you don't cure the restoration properly, there's no bond at the bottom. And then you're going to get, obviously micro leakage and sensitivity, and, the problem's just compounded.
Yeah, and when you load that occlusally, then it's going to have give, and you're going to get, pressure across the dentinal tubules, and once again, that's going to create a pulpal reaction.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about, we've got our handy dandy bottle here with the dye in it, and I really want you to show folks what, what focused beams and that sort of thing are good for in dentistry, if you would.
Yeah, well, we'll try and just do a demonstration with these two lights here.
Sure.
And this is just purely colored water in here. And if we just place both of these lights, I might need your hand here, John.
No problem. I can go ahead and
if you
do
do
one.
If you do one,
Sure.
that'd be great.
Okay.
We're just putting these up against the water, and then you can kind of look at that. Can you see that on the screen there? A bit of a difference there. Both of these are good curing lights, but you can see that there's a difference in the intensity between those two, and you can see also that the beam size is different between those two. I mentioned before, John, that these are both excellent lights, but you need to think of what it is you're trying to do with the lights.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are you trying to cure orthodontic brackets? Are you trying to do sealants? Or are you trying to do bulk filling restorations?
Right.
There's a difference there. And you mentioned also about the wavelengths from the light. If you buy 3M composites,
mm-hmm.
you don't need to worry about alternative photoinitiators because they don't use them. Okay? So if you buy a 3M curing light and you're using 3M composites, that's fine. But if you buy other composites, then you may need to get a curing light that has a broader spectral emission.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, this lens on the end of the velo, does that help focus that into the...
Oh, yes.
Into that? Okay.
Yeah. There's no question that the lens on the end of that light is specially designed to focus the light, and it's called collimation. It maintains the light over distance. So if you think of a lighthouse, mm-hmm. then you think of the beam from a lighthouse. That's what this is trying to do. It's trying to give you a focus beam over a distance, and the Velo does a great job of that. Some of the curing lights are not quite so good. And if you want to try something with your own curing light in your practice, I'd recommend try to cure the resin restoration at a distance of, say, 6 millimeters or even 10 millimeters away, and see how that does. And if you do that, you'll quickly see differences between quality lights and lights that don't, quite meet the specifications.
One of the other things I'd like you to tell the audience about, because this is something that I really hadn't given a lot of consideration of until I met you several years ago, and it completely changed the way I did my composites, which was the importance of the eye protection. Because I was always one that I would put a sleeve, over my light, and then we just make contact with the tooth and pull the trigger. And of course, we've already talked about the sliding around and not being able to keep it where it goes. But I didn't realize how really important it is to protect your eyes and what can happen to you, because I know there's people out there that do simply put it in the mouth and watch it, and they figure, oh, it's pointed the other direction. What can I really do to myself over time?
That's it's a good question, and it's a reason to be concerned as well. Now, some of you may have heard about LED lights being used in street lamps. And you may be aware, if you go and search for this online, you'll see that last year the American Medical Association, so AMA, mm-hmm. issued a warning about the blue light in LED street lamps. And what they were concerned about actually wasn't to do with your eyes, but it was to do with change in sleep patterns. And it was also for birds and animals and such like that. They're definitely aware that very strong LED lights cause changes in sleep. Now you may say, well, now how come that's happening? I mean, the street lamps are white,
right?
But LEDs can't produce white light. What they do is they produce a mixture of light, and if you go and look at it, you'll see that white light from an LED has got a large blue spectral peak in it. Now that blue spectral peak is actually just the same as what we see from these curing lights, except we're seeing all the blue. So the reason behind that story is just to let you know that the medical profession is very much aware of the dangers and potential consequences of exposing the eyes to a lot of blue light. One is it can disturb your sleep patterns. Secondly, it can cause macular degeneration, and that's the real concern. And 15, 20 years ago when we had low output halogen lights, mm-hmm. it really wasn't a concern, even with the initial LED lights that weren't very powerful, it
Right.
wasn't a concern. But now that we've got these really super powerful, LED curing lights, and you mentioned, new ones just come out delivering 4,000 milliwatts per centimeter squared. These are very, very bright light sources, delivering a lot of blue light to your eyes. And, if you're doing 1,000 restorations a year, sure, this could be a problem. You need to protect your eyes.
Okay.
Something that, the final thing on that is that this is a cumulative hazard. It's not just like a one-shot exposure and that's it. It's actually a cumulative effect on the eyes. And if you're interested in that, I've got some information up on YouTube on it. And also, if you just search for it online, you'll find a lot of information on the blue light hazard. Okay.
Well, and I would like to mention your YouTube channel, which is Price Curing Lab. We are going to put a link to that when we get this in the can, so to speak. You're watching live now, but we will do a few little tweaks to it and put it back up. And when we do, we'll put links up to that channel, and so people can see and learn from that. There's something else when you and I were talking earlier about just the glasses in general. And the one thing that I really hadn't thought about was the fact of that just because it's an orange filter
Yes.
doesn't necessarily mean that it's blocking everything. And it goes along the same way with, we talked about that just because when you hit the on button that both of these lights turn blue or put out blue energy doesn't mean they're doing the same thing. And I'd never really thought about it because, you think, oh, orange is orange and it blocks everything. But you were telling me that's not necessarily the case.
No, it's not the case. And it's actually just the same as lasers. For those of you that have lasers in your practice, you know that you have to buy the right protective glasses that match the wavelength of your laser.
Absolutely.
That there's no point using 810 nanometer glasses on a 720 nanometer laser if you have that or whatever. So the same thing applies to dental curing lights. And we've got these ultraspec glasses here, and we've published some stuff on that. If you just want to give me that one, I'll just kind of show a very simple kind of demonstration here. Well, we're just going to show, if we look at the screen over here, I'm just going to turn this one here on, so it's running. I'll take this here, and then we just interpose this in between, and we now shine the light. There's nothing coming through at all.
I mean, look at the difference. For those of you that are watching this live, this is really impactful because nothing from that light, and that Velo is a very powerful light, and none of that energy is getting through that orange lens.
So we haven't done this, so we're going to do an experiment live now.
Okay.
So we'll see how this works. I've actually turned this up to the extra power setting.
This doesn't involve me putting my finger in a light socket.
No, it doesn't.
Right,
no, I'll do this. But so I'm just going to see if this works. We'll put this on the highest power setting, delivering over 3,000 milliwatts here, and we'll now see what happens when we. Stop. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Didn't work very well.
This is live, and
this
we
is live.
flat out said we were doing an experiment, so we haven't tried this before, so I'm okay with it. We're going to do it one more time and just see. And also, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Velo, that at this high setting, the Velo will only be on for 3 seconds, which is why we're not getting a big, long sample time with it. It automatically shuts off after 3 seconds.
There's nothing there.
Yeah, you can see that very well. Flat line.
It's a flat line.
Yeah. But then right back as soon as the orange comes on.
Yep.
And what I learned was that these glasses that we're wearing right now and that we're using for this experiment are orange lenses designed to stop all the wavelengths that are in the Velo. So the Velo, as we talked about earlier, covers from about 400 to about 465, 470. And a pair of glasses that would work on a light that only cures camphorquinone, which would be the majority of the curing lights out there that are not broadband, those are going to be LEDs putting out at about 465. So if you have glasses for a normal non-broadband curing light, those glasses are not going to protect you from the lower wavelengths of the Velo. So you need to make sure that you pair your eyewear with the device.
Yeah, I wouldn't say so emphatically that they won't protect you. I'd say that they may not, and that they have to be tested. So it's not just a case of measuring the total amount of light that comes through, but you do need to look at the spectrum of the light that comes through. But certainly I can say that the ultradent glasses do protect you against the Velo curing light. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, we've got a quality company here, and they're making the right type of eyewear to protect it. And, you know, to kind of defend them as well, I mean, if you had a company XYZ that made orange glasses,
Right.
they couldn't be expected to go and protect against all different wavelengths that
Sure.
are out there. So the bottom line is what you're saying. You need to make sure that you're using the right glasses for the light that you're using.
Yeah, it's a dynamic
Yes.
market. Things change.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
Okay.
Things change.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I think that pretty much wraps it up. So before we wrap up, we do have questions. I'm sorry.
Great.
Melody's here. She's going to read them to us off camera. Go ahead, Mel.
Can Velo light pass in power to cure the fiber post space, mean to reach the button dark area through the unicore, or Permaflow DC set the non-cure bonding in the bottom dark area, as we know the fiber post space is narrow, long path?
Right, they're talking about just
Okay.
passing the light through
Yeah.
the post. Yeah.
Okay, I would say no.
Okay.
I don't think any curing light's really powerful enough to get the light all the way to the bottom. There'll be some. I always recommend. I'm a practicing dentist, and I'd always recommend using a dual cure resin to cement a fiber post. I wouldn't just rely upon a light cure material.
Okay. And then I know they also mentioned Permaflow, and that depends on that particular material. There's two types of
Permaflow
Permaflow.
DC.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, then,
Okay.
yeah, that's never mind.
So Permaflow DC is fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Light cure, no.
Next question, can Velo be used to detect old composite remaining in a refining case?
Okay.
Go
There are attachments that you can put on the Velo.
Absolutely.
Do we have them here?
Oh, we might. Let me step back here and see. We do.
Yeah. Great. So there are some things that you can put on the tip of a Velo.
The transalune, the black light, the endo guide, and the proximate.
Yes. So with the Velo system, yeah, not the Grand.
Yeah.
It goes on. I've got the one for this. They have these attachments that you can use to detect or help you find caries, and also help you find other composites as well. So they have the translume lens, as you said, the black light lens, the endo guide lens, and the proxy cure. Okay, so there are a variety of different lenses that you can use.
And they're magnetic, so they're due out for the Grand, I think, in January
Okay.
this year. But for the regular Velo, they're simply magnetic, and you put them on, and then they stay until you remove them.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, this particular lens will show composite or sealant, for that matter, as well.
Okay, this question comes from France.
Hey, great.
Great.
For you, the power of Velo is enough to polymerize a photopolymerized composite through endo crown onlay or overlay. Actually, it's the mode with heated composites. Hope you know what that means.
Okay, I'm going to take a stab at
Sure,
that. I'm going
go
to say
ahead.
that, okay, so some curing lights only have one power output.
Mm-hmm.
The Velo has got the high and the extra power output on it. And personally, I never use the high or the extra power for curing my composites. However, the extra power I find great for doing exactly what this question is, asking, can you cure through ceramics, indirect restorations? The extra power is great for that because, yes, it's going to give you your best chance of getting through that ceramic,
Okay.
be it zirconia or be it Emax or whatever. Yeah.
So it's bright enough that it actually goes through those translucent materials, and
Yeah.
then okay.
But I would still use a dual cure resin underneath it.
Okay.
I wouldn't use light cure underneath it.
Wouldn't rely completely on light cure.
No,
Okay.
I wouldn't. No,
Yeah.
but certainly, I mean, in my practice, the extra power is indirect restoration power.
Okay.
And the other question, there was the tail part for that for heated composites. Personally, as a clinician, I really like using heated composites. I don't believe that heated composites give me any better cure. However, in my hands, they flow so much more beautifully into the cavity, and I feel that I get much better adaptation. And again, when I'm making my specimens in the lab, I'd like to use, I'd like to have heated composites. I find I get much better adaptation. And I've seen that when I've sectioned specimens, when I've looked for voids in specimens. Heating the composite doesn't do anything at all for me in terms of degree of conversion or hardness, but it does give me way better adaptation. So heating composites in my practice is a good idea.
Okay.
That's it for questions.
That's it for questions.
That's it for questions.
Okay. Well, then, thank you all very much for watching. As I said, if you want to go to Richard's YouTube, his channel, that's Price Curing Lab, and we'll put a link to that once we get this thing up and loaded online. And thank you very much for watching. Have a great day.
And if I could say something?
Certainly.
If you go to Google Scholar, if you just type in Richard Price Google Scholar, you'll find me on that. And then you can find all my publications. I've got publications in Dentistry Today and all the way up to Journal of Dental Research. So I try and cover many different areas in my publications.
I told you guys, he's smart, and I wouldn't lie. So thank you very much. And thank you, Richard, for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much for your time.
Come back in an hour.
Oh, that's right. I totally forgot. In 1 hour, Melanie and I will be here on Facebook Live. So we're going to kind of clean up and get reset, and we'll be back in about an hour. Thank you very much.